There are places on Earth that feel like the edge of existence. For me, that place was Post 9. It was an old weather station, left over from the Cold War, half buried in snow, half forgotten by the people who built it. The nearest settlement was over 100 kilometers away. The wind never stopped. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was a silence that pressed on you, like a living thing, whispering in your ear that you shouldn't be here. There were 4 of us stationed there that winter. Me, Sergei, old Captain Mikhail, and a young recruit named Artyom, who still thought the military was all about medals and stories to tell at bars. We all lived in that concrete box of a barrack, where the walls sweated cold and the lights hummed like dying insects. After a while, you start hearing things in the cold. Wind that sounds like voices. Footsteps that are just ice cracking. Your mind tries to fill in the emptiness. At least, that's what I told myself when the wall beside my bunk started making noises. At first, it was just a faint creak. Something shifting behind the insulation. I thought it was the pipes, or rats, or the wind scraping along the outer steel panels. But one night, lying half asleep, I realized it wasn't noise. It was whispering, and it said my name. I froze, waited, nothing, just the buzz of the ceiling light and the hiss of the wind outside. The next night it came again, only clearer this time, closer. Open it! My eyes opened instantly. The words were inside the wall, but they had breath. They moved the air. Who's there? I whispered back, my voice catching on my breath. Silence. Then faint. So faint it felt like it was breathing right against my ear. I'm inside. I told myself it was fatigue, isolation, the brain's way of processing loneliness. Post 9 had driven better men than me into breakdowns. Still, the voice, it wasn't just in my head. It vibrated through the wall. There was depth to it. The following day I said nothing, but Sergei kept glancing at me across the mess hall. When I asked him if he'd heard anything weird lately, he looked down at his tray and muttered, "Don't talk about it." That was it. No explanation. That night I didn't sleep. I waited. The whisper came again, not calling my name this time, but moving. I could hear the sound shift through the wall, from one end of the barrack to the other. By 3 a.m., I couldn't stand it anymore. I grabbed my field knife and knelt by the wall. The metal of the blade scraped against the wooden paneling, a sound that cut through the silence like bone snapping. I started to dig into the seam between the boards, prying them apart bit by bit. My hands were trembling. Finally, I made a hole. The air that came through was cold. Too cold, like it came from outside. I leaned closer, trying to see inside the gap. Just darkness. Then a voice behind me said, "Too late." I froze. It wasn't whispered this time. It was spoken, right in the middle of the room. I turned. No one was there. The bunk beds were empty. The lights flickered once. Then again. My knife slipped from my hand. My pulse was hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. I pressed my back against the wall. The voice came again, closer now. But it was my own voice. Go back to sleep. I don't remember passing out, just the cold seeping into me and then waking up in my bunk at dawn. The wall was untouched. No hole, no mark. The knife was gone, but there was dried blood on my palms. Sergei saw it at breakfast. He didn't ask, just stared. And in his eyes I saw something that terrified me more than the voice, recognition. He had heard it too. After that, I started noticing the others change. Mikhail, usually loud and bitter, stopped talking altogether. Artyom began sleeping in the storage room, saying the walls there felt quieter. At night, I could hear him muttering to himself. Then one morning, we found him gone. His bed was empty, the outer door half open. We followed his tracks out into the snow. They led straight into the storm, then stopped. No struggle, no sign of where he went. Just gone. When we got back inside, Sergei said he heard him whispering from the walls again that night. Same voice, same tone. That's when I realized something. Whatever it wasn't inside the wall. It was using it, carrying sound through it, traveling along the metal and the pipes, like a parasite. After Artyom vanished, the station was quiet for 2 full days. Then, late one night, I heard scratching from inside the heater vent. Not whispering this time, just the faint drag of nails on metal. I couldn't bring myself to look. I just sat there, trembling, every nerve on edge, waiting for it to stop. The next morning, Mikhail locked himself in the communications room. He tried to radio base, but the signal was just static. When I opened the door to check on him, he was gone too. No coat, no footprints outside. That night, the whisper came again. Only this time it didn't call my name. It called Sergei's. I heard him from the other bunk, whispering back, like he couldn't help himself. The conversation went on for nearly an hour. Quiet, slow, back and forth murmurs between him and the wall, then silence. When I woke up, his bed was empty. Now I'm alone. The heaters have stopped. The radio doesn't work. I haven't slept in 2 days. The cold is inside my bones. Sometimes I still hear footsteps in the hall. Sometimes I think I see movement in the reflection of the frost-covered window, but the whispering, that stopped. Now it just breathes, right behind the wall. I think I understand it now. It's not a person, not a ghost. It's what happens when isolation rots the human mind and seeps into steel, wood, and bone, until you can't tell what's real anymore, until the silence learns your voice. So if you ever get sent to Post 9, don't talk to it, don't answer it, and whatever you do, don't cut the wall. Every family has a room they don't talk about. For mine, it's the one at the end of the hallway in my great-grandparents' house. The Red Room. No one locks it. No one forbids entry. But nobody goes in. You can feel it from the moment you walk down that hallway. The air grows colder, heavier, like you're walking underwater. Even before I ever knew the story, I could sense something wrong about it. My great-aunt Diane used to sleep there. She died young, 12 years old. Leukemia, they said. The family never moved her things. The walls are still painted that deep, suffocating red she loved. Her bed is still made. And sitting on top of her dresser, facing the door, is the same Raggedy Ann doll that she got for her 9th birthday. Its eyes always seemed too shiny, too fixed. Every holiday, the family gathers there. Long wooden table, photographs on the mantel, old stories traded over food and laughter. But no one mentions Diane, and no one enters that room. The door stays closed, blending into the hallway like part of the wall. I remember the first time I did. I must have been 8 or 9. I opened it just a crack, enough for the light from the hallway to stretch across the floorboards. The air hit me first. Cold still, thick with that dusty sweetness of rooms that haven't been touched in decades. Then the walls. Red from floor to ceiling, almost wet-looking in the dim light. And on the dresser, the doll. Perched perfectly upright, head tilted just slightly, hair matted from age. I didn't even step inside. I just remember my chest tightening, adrenaline spiking, that animal instinct that tells you something is watching. I ran out before I even realized what I was doing. It wasn't until years later that I learned about Diane. The story that still circulates at family gatherings isn't really told. It's hinted at. My mother says Diane used to talk to herself a lot. My grandfather says she was lonely, homeschooled, isolated from other kids because of her illness. My great-grandmother insists she was happy right until the end. But they all look away when they say it. Diane died in that room. The family never painted over it. Then came Jose, my little cousin. 6 years old, curious about everything. It was his first visit to the house. He was that kind of kid who never stopped exploring, always running his hands along the walls, poking his head into cupboards, fascinated by things adults forgot existed. No one saw him go into the Red Room. One moment, He was playing with his toy cars in the hallway. The next, we heard a bang, like something falling, then a scream. When my aunt found him, he was in tears, clutching his arms around himself, his little chest heaving with sobs. He kept saying, "The big kids hurt me. The big kids in the red room." At first she thought he was imagining things, but then he lifted his shirt. Across his back were red marks, scratches, bruises, already forming. He was shaking too hard to explain properly. The words came out between gasps. "They were biting me. They told me to play." My aunt didn't believe in ghosts, or anything close to it, but something about the way Jose said it, that raw panic in his voice, made her go check the room anyway. When she stepped inside, the air was colder than it should have been. She said later that it felt pressurized, like walking underwater. The curtains were drawn, but faint daylight filtered through the red fabric, painting everything in a soft, pulsing glow. And there, on the dresser, was the doll. Same position, same tilt of the head. Only this time, she noticed something she swore hadn't been there before. Tiny streaks along the wooden dresser, scratches, parallel, like fingernail marks. She started to back out, heart hammering, when something caught her eye. The doll's arm was bent at a strange angle, lifted slightly from where it rested before. My aunt blinked, thinking her eyes were playing tricks. Then the other arm twitched upward too. Slow, deliberate, until both were raised halfway, like a child asking for a hug. My aunt screamed. She slammed the door shut, stumbled back into the hallway and dragged Jose out of the house. After that, things changed. My great-grandparents stopped hosting holidays. The doll was moved to storage. The red room was left exactly as it was, but no one stayed near it. And yet, every time I visit that house, I still find myself looking down that hallway. The door is always closed, but the faintest strip of red light seeps out from underneath, flickering like something's moving inside. No one talks about it anymore, but we all know the story. And sometimes, late at night, when the air is still and heavy, you can hear the faint tap-tap of something knocking against the dresser, like wooden hands brushing against the surface. Years later, I found something that made my stomach turn. In the attic behind old photo albums, there was a box. Faded, dusty, marked Diane's Things. Inside were toys, drawings, and a few letters she had written before she died. Most of them were what you'd expect from a sick child. Messy handwriting, words about wanting to play outside again. But the last one was different. It wasn't written to anyone in the family. It was addressed simply, "To the kids in my room." The handwriting was shaky, the ink smudged. "Thank you for playing with me. I don't get tired anymore. I'll wait for you when you come back." No one in my family believes the room is haunted. They say Diane was lonely, that maybe she imagined friends who never went away. But every time I think about Jose, about the bruises, the scratches, the terror in his eyes, I can't help but wonder. Maybe loneliness doesn't leave a room when the person does. Maybe it just stays there, waiting for someone new to play with. And maybe that's why, even now, no one dares to open the door, because whatever's inside that red room, it doesn't want to be alone again. When I was 12, my family moved into the upper unit of a rundown duplex in one of the rougher parts of the city. It was the kind of place where the street lights flickered at night and the sound of sirens blended into the background, like part of the air. There were 6 of us jammed into that place: my mom, my older brother Jay, my younger brother Aki, and my 2 little sisters, who were 4 and 3. My mom was a single parent, working long hours, barely sleeping, always doing her best to keep things together. We didn't have much: a mattress on the floor, a TV, a gifted PlayStation 4 someone gave my mom as a favor. That was it. The walls were thin enough to hear the neighbors' arguments. The ceiling creaked every time someone walked. But to us, it was a home. For a while. And then came the night everything changed. there's this belief that children can sense things adults can't. I never really thought much about it until that night. Mom was working late, so we were all split up like usual. My sisters and I were downstairs with a family friend who rented the lower unit. Jay and Aki stayed upstairs, playing the PS4 in Mom's room, the only room with a working outlet and a door that closed properly. Around 9, Jay went to the bathroom. Aki went to the kitchen to grab chips. A couple minutes later, we heard something, a noise so sharp it cut through the TV, a sound that didn't fit in the normal hum of that house. Then came the scream, high-pitched, raw, the kind of sound that freezes your blood before you even move. We all ran upstairs just as my mom was getting home. He didn't even get her shoes off. She rushed in behind us. And there was Aki, clutching Jay so tightly his little arms were shaking. Jay looked pale, frozen in place, eyes wide like he'd seen something he couldn't make sense of. When we finally got Aki to calm down, his story came out in pieces. He said he walked into Jay's room, flipped the light switch, and the bulb exploded. In that split second of blinding light, he said he saw someone standing in the corner. A tall man, all black, wearing a hat, a top hat, and smiling. My mom's face went blank. Not disbelief, more like recognition. She didn't ask questions. She went straight for the sage bundle. The smell of burning sage filled the air, heavy and sweet. She walked from room to room, whispering under her breath, smoke trailing behind her like a veil. She opened every window, every door, letting the night air push through. I remember my sisters asking who we were chasing away. My mom didn't answer. She just said, "Keep the windows open. Don't look into the corners." That night, none of us slept in our own rooms. We all crowded into hers, the mattress, the floor, wrapped in blankets. The only light came from the TV's dull glow. For a moment, I felt safe, normal again. My sisters wouldn't stop giggling, bouncing on the mattress. My mom told them to settle down, to sit against the wall until you can behave. So they did, side by side, quiet for maybe a minute. Then both of them screamed. They sprinted for the bed, crying, shaking so hard they could barely breathe. My mom caught them and asked what happened, but they just pointed, toward the kitchen. They said, "There's a man there. He's smiling." The kitchen was visible through the doorway, nothing but darkness and the faint hum of the fridge. But my mom didn't hesitate. She stood up fast, her whole posture changing. Not afraid, just fierce. She turned on every light, the kitchen, the hallway, the living room. The house filled with that weak yellow glow that makes every shadow sharper. Then she grabbed the sage again and lit it, the smoke curling thick. She threw open the windows, even the door to the stairwell that led outside. Her voice cut through the air, calm but commanding. "You're not welcome here. Get out." She made us repeat it, all of us. So there we were, a bunch of terrified kids shouting into the night, "You are not welcome here. Get out!" And then the footsteps, slow, heavy, from the kitchen, to the hallway, to the stairs, each step clear as a heartbeat. Me and Jay looked at each other. We didn't say anything. We didn't have to, because we both knew what we'd heard. My mom didn't let us talk about it after that. She said the less we gave it attention, the less power it would have. But that wasn't the end of it. A few weeks later, when things had quieted down, Jay came home from school early. Mom was still at work. I was in the lower unit. He told me later that when he opened the door to the upstairs apartment, he heard something. The sound of someone walking down the hallway, heavy boots, slow and deliberate. He called out. No answer. When he peeked into Mom's room, the TV was off, but in the reflection of the black screen, he swore he saw a figure standing behind him. Tall, still, hat pulled low. He didn't wait to see more. He bolted downstairs and stayed outside until Mom got home. He didn't tell her right away, but I knew. You can see it in someone's face when they've seen something they can't explain but don't want to believe. Years later, when we finally moved out, Mom told me something that's stuck with me since. She said she'd once woken up that same night, the night of the footsteps, and saw a shadow pass the window. Not outside, but across the curtain from inside the room. She said it stopped, turned slightly, and for just a second, she saw the brim of a hat. After that, she never talked about it again. People say fear fades with time, that your brain fills in gaps, reshapes memories until they make sense. But I still remember the sound of those footsteps, the burnt smell of sage, the look on Jay's face when he realized something had been in the room with him. And sometimes when I walk alone at night, I swear I catch the faint sound of heavy boots on pavement, falling into step just behind me. Not close, not far, just enough to remind me of that night. And every time I look over my shoulder, I half expect to see him there, that tall figure, face hidden under the brim of a hat, smiling in the dark.